I want to thank both Trita and Matt for joining us. Trita is at the Quincy Institute and was a founder of NIAC, an organization of Iranian Americans, and did some extraordinary policy work and wrote a book. I still, Trita, think about that book, the first one you did about Iran and Israel fighting over what goes on in the center. It changed my whole perspective on how I look at some of these regional conflicts. But thank you for joining us. We're going to start with you, Trita, to talk a little about the well, you start, and then I had some questions about what the hell Trump was thinking. Go
Sure.
ahead.
Thank you so much, Jim. Great to be with all of you, and thank you for all the work that you guys have been doing for decades. I want to start off by just saying, as an Iranian American, I want to just apologize for some people in my community who's been running around. I'm sure you noticed them celebrating this and waving Israeli flags. Just want to make sure you all know that despite the fact that they're very loud, I do not think that they are the majority in any way, shape, or form. The situation in the region and in this war is really dire, and I fear it's going to get much, much worse in the next 2 days, 3 days, and I'll explain why. First of all, let me say this. Trump failed. His plan A was that he thought that he was going to get a quick victory. He's going to get a collapse of the regime within 48 hours after he had tactically had the success of killing the supreme leader. He thought that by Sunday evening this would be over. He would declare victory. He would have another Venezuela. And by Monday morning, when the markets open, it would all be over with. Clearly, that is not the way it has played out. The Iranians had been preparing for this for quite some time. They were not taken by surprise in the same manner as they were in June. Certainly, the death of the supreme leader, one could ask oneself why on earth it would still be meeting in the manner that they do. But nevertheless, in terms of their operational decision making, he was no longer involved in that anyways. The Iranians have drawn the conclusion, and by the way, after the assassination, Trump reached out, at least through two different countries, to try to get agreement for a ceasefire, and the Iranians rejected it. The reason why they rejected it is that their conclusion is that any ceasefire has to come only after this war has been as costly as possible for all sides. Otherwise, this ceasefire will not last. They need to make sure that it's so costly so that everyone concludes that it was a mistake starting this war, and as a result, it will be a mistake restarting this war. Their experience is, in their view, that because they agreed to the ceasefire in June, this was a mistake. It only gave the United States and Israel time to regroup, remobilize, and relaunch the war. 6, 7 months later, Israel was back. So this time, and they believe that towards the end of the 12-day war, they were getting the upper hand. Israel was running out of interceptors, more missiles were getting through, even though the Iranians were shooting less of them. And they regret that they agreed to it. They think they should have continued the war. And this time around, as a result, perhaps they're overcorrecting. They're not going to commit that mistake. So they rejected Trump's request for ceasefire. And I don't suspect that they will agree to it unless there's been far, far more damage done. Now, they cannot reach American troops or ships because they're actually staying quite far away from Iran's reach in the Indian Ocean, not in the Persian Gulf. And as a result, they're targeting US bases in the GCC states, which of course looks very counterproductive. Particularly Oman and Qatar had played critical role in trying to evade this war. And I think that they are rightfully very, very upset with Iran at this point. The Iranian calculation, though, is that this is completely existential. And as a result, they don't seem to care that much about the day after in terms of their relations with the GCC. They are going for maximum damage there. And one of the things that they've sought to do, and I think they successfully have done, is that at this point, it is the Iranians that are determining the geography of this war, the length, the scope, and the intensity of this war. This has then created a bit of panic, I would say, or at least some level of desperation in the administration. Their plan A did not work. Their plan A was completely unrealistic in the first place. It was born out of the same unrealistic expectation of Iranian weakness that they had, which was not accurate. Not that Iran hasn't become weaker, but not as weak as they thought. And as a result, now we're seeing that the administration is quickly moving in the direction of talking about ground troops, talking about other forms of intervention, expanding the war, throwing everything they can at the Iranians in order to try to turn the tables here. Um, this is going to be an extremely bloody ordeal. They are now not only mobilizing Kurds in Iraq, but they're actually bringing them in from other places as well. They're hoping to be able to essentially start a civil war on Iran's western border. This would both put additional pressure on Tehran. This would also make it much more difficult for them to keep focused. If Iran is expanding the war externally, Trump is trying to expand the war internally by going into the ground, not just bombing them from the air. I don't see any likelihood of Trump backing down, at least until he has tried this effort to see if this maximum bombardment and war will cause the Iranians to get down on their knees. I doubt that it will. The Iranian metric for success is very different from that of the United States. The Iranians cannot win this militarily. All they need to do, however, is they need to draw Trump as close to destroying his own presidency as possible before they lose the war. And then the question is, which one of these two things will take the longest? Do they have the wherewithal to be able to withstand this level of bombardment? And it is getting very, very brutal. Tehran is a complete war scene at this point. Several hospitals have been bombed as well. The Israelis are once again using the same methodology as they did in southern Lebanon and in Gaza, in Tehran as well. But at the same time, we're already seeing that Trump started this war at a very low support level. It's gotten much worse because he can't stick to a single justification or a single objective. Everything is just shifting. At the beginning, I think it was deliberate. At this point, I think they are just essentially throwing whatever they can at the wall in the hope of trying to make some sort of a convincing case. The more they have tried, the worse it has gotten, particularly the statements that made it very clear that the decision actually was in the hands of the Israelis rather than the US itself. So unfortunately, I think at least for the next couple of days, we're going to see a dramatic intensification of this. And I fear that neither side will back down until at least they've gone through that phase. I'll stop there, Jim.
Okay, thanks. Matt, met Matt years ago at the Foundation for Middle East Peace here in Washington. He then went to work with Bernie Sanders as his foreign policy advisor. I remember the extraordinary testimony you gave before the platform drafting committee that I was on back then. And when Bernie was looking for a guy, you were the one. Served for a number of years and now is the Center for International Policy. And I really thank you for joining us as well, Matt. Trita hinted at, drifted into some of the areas of the politics of this here.
Yeah.
Talk about how this is playing out as you see it right now.
Sure. And thanks again. Thanks so much for inviting me and great to be here with Trita, who I think is just doing 24/7 interviews, doing a fantastic job explaining this war in public. So I really appreciate the work Trita is doing. Um,
Right,
I mean,
thank you.
in terms of public support, I mean, this is an unpopular war already. Someone commented earlier today that it took a number of months for Iraq to get to this point. There's about a quarter, from what I've seen, about 25% of Americans who support it, close to 50% oppose it, and the rest don't really know. That's a bad number. But it's pretty consistent with what we've seen with other military interventions from Trump. Venezuela, which, as stupid as it was, illegal as it clearly was tactically effective, and it still gave Trump no bump. Um, so again, I think this is consistent with an American public that is tired of war. And of course, one candidate who understood that was Donald Trump. he ran on a platform of I want to be a peace president. I'm anti-war. I don't want to get into wars. I want to end wars. So he is clearly breaking an important promise that he made. Now, of course, people shouldn't have believed Trump. I didn't believe Trump, but what I thought was very interesting is that Trump, and he does have a level of political intelligence, we should give him that. He understood that there is a constituency of voters in this country, a sizable one, that is very attractive to that anti-war message. They believe that we have been wasting money, wasting lives, wasting time, wasting, political capital in pointless military interventions over the past 2 decades and more. And they want that to change. And what they see here is just more of the same. Now, in terms of Congress, I mean, Congress always seems to take a long time to get the memo on this stuff. The population tends to be in a better place than Congress usually. I will say that on the Democratic side, we have a lot more champions on this issue than we've had in a long time, probably since I've been in Washington. And that's a tribute to the work that you all have done, that a number of us, like Trita and others, have been doing in coalition together for a long time to point members of Congress toward better policies, to try to foster a better conversation and debate about what really keeps America safe and prosperous. It's not war. Um, so we've had all along, as Trump assembled his mass force there in the region, you've had people like Ro Khanna, like Senator Chris Murphy, Senator Chris Van Hollen, Tim Kaine, a number of others who's been sounding the alarm. But of course, the leadership in both parties, Hakeem Jeffries in the House, Chuck Schumer in the Senate, and even the committee chairs have been very late on this. Although I'll note Jack Reed has surprised me a few times. But as of last week, after a lot of pressure, a lot of lobbying, both from outside groups and from inside Congress, from members themselves, Jeffries and Schumer both finally endorsed, I think it was Thursday, the war powers resolutions in both the House and the Senate. The question then became, okay, you've endorsed it, you've announced your support. Are you going to whip behind it? Are you really going to put your energy into getting your caucus to vote for these things? Then, of course, the war started Saturday. Both Schumer and Jeffrey's initial responses were as bad as you would have thought. Their main concern was that Trump hadn't properly briefed them before he launched this stupid war, which is important. I mean, yes, congressional authorization is obviously what the Constitution requires. But the problem here, and this is the point we've been trying to make with members of Congress, the problem with this war is that not that the Trump administration did not fill out the appropriate legal forms. The problem is that this is a stupid, illegal, catastrophic war, and we already see it going that way. So I think as I'm watching, both Jeffries and Schumer's messaging has gotten a little better. What I'm hearing is Jeffries will be whipping in support of the war powers resolution. I am hoping that Schumer will do so as well. He will take a little bit more of work. The vote on the Senate war powers resolution is scheduled for tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Again, it's kind of a quick vote. I think, in addition to actually passing a resolution, one of the values of this exercise, which we've now done a few times, is putting political pressure, using it as a tool to generate political pressure, using it as a tool to generate attention, to provide opportunities for education, for discussion and debate. But still, I haven't gotten a count of where things are in the Senate. We will probably get every Democrat except for Fetterman. And I would hope that we would get at least, two, three, maybe even four Republicans. I do think we got a few Republicans when Senator Kaine introduced his Iran war powers resolution last year. So we'll see. That's where things stand. If the vote, it's I mean, it's not the last vote in the Senate tomorrow. It's just the motion to discharge to make sure we get to the actual vote, which will come later. So there's still going to be a bit of time over the next week, maybe a little bit more, for the kind of attention and generating political pressure that I was talking about. And this is really the moment to be doing that. I mean, this is obviously, I don't want to pretend that I mean, I will say it's an opportunity. It is a horrible opportunity, but because it is so horrible, I think we really need to exploit this moment for all it's worth.
A question for both of you. Trita, you suggested in the beginning that Trump had an eye on this being another Venezuela. Quick in out, make a point, and declare victory, whatever that is. What's been fascinating is, and very predictable, is that when things don't go exactly as he foresees them, because he can't ever admit defeat, he changes, he keeps moving the goalpost, and the goal moving it closer to him. And in the beginning, it appeared that as he talked, there was a kind of a fantasy, like the little kid who goes up to his room and throws a tantrum and starts breaking stuff, assuming that's going to make things better. It was like, if I just bomb a lot, magically something will change. There never was a plan, as if there could be a plan. The question I have for you is, how what do Iranians think? What would you think that the Iranian leadership would think that the president had in mind for them in this? Do they really think it was regime change? Do they really think that he wanted a mass uprising and like the Bush fantasy about Iraq, a beacon of democracy that would light up the whole region? Um, or do they think he was just punishing them to get them to agree to terms that he had on the nuclear and other issues in the region? What do you think the Iranians thought the plan was with Israel and US doing this?
So things have changed, Jim, in the sense that up until as the negotiations were going on,
Mhm.
I think they thought that Trump wanted complete surrender from the Iranians, but they thought that there might be a chance that they could entice him towards a different deal, entailing a lot of business opportunities and et cetera, et cetera. They were constantly very suspicious that this was a decoy for another preparation for war, which is why they constantly prepared for that other scenario. Then once the war started, then I don't know exactly what they thought in the first hours, whether this was just something he was doing in order to be able to say, look, I'm willing to hit you, and then go back to the negotiating table and see if he could get his surrender parameters accepted. But once he, or actually the Israelis, killed the supreme leader, all of those doubts, all of those questions were then gone. It was
Do we know who killed the supreme leader?
it was the Israelis.
It was the Israelis.
Well, I'm pretty confident that the CIA was involved, but as you know, this is illegal
Yeah.
in the United States. So Trump is taking credit for it because he likes to do that. But when they're more careful, they're saying that the Israelis did it.
Okay.
Either way, um, once that was done, a reporter asked me if this was like the moment of death for the Iranians. I said, no, it was a moment of clarity. At that point, they were like, okay, this is existential. He is completely after regime change. Even surrender is not something that he's contemplating. And that's part of the reason why all of the Iranian red lines were completely evaporated at that moment. Part of the reason why they started striking back so hard in so many different places. I personally did not think they were going to hit all GCC states right away. I thought there would be an escalation ladder. Apparently, there wasn't. And a big part of that is because of what happened to the Supreme Leader, although some of that had already started earlier on.
One question on the supreme leader. Um, it is um, it is a religious issue of some import, not just in Iran, but in communities around the region. Uh, how long will that how deep will that reverberate, and how long will there be consequences in Bahrain in particular, or in Lebanon, or where the communities are as large as they are?
So I think the administration knew already about these different implications, the risk of them at least, and calculated that it was worth it for a variety of reasons. We've already seen riots and attacks in Pakistan, in India.
Mhm.
Bahrain has massive riots right now, an uprising. The Saudis are apparently involved again to
With
clamp
people
down.
chanting Ya Ali. I mean, it
Yeah.
is another factor in the theology here is that martyrdom is real, and is a driving. They know how to deal with suffering in terms of their theology.
I mean, I don't want to like exaggerate it, but I do think that in some ways, this may have been a favor to the Supreme Leader because he
Mhm.
was allowed to die a martyr instead of dying of old age.
Mhm. Matt, I'm sorry. Do you have more, Trita?
I was just going to say that I don't think the Iranians have actually tried to activate the Shia communities in various places. I think what we've seen so far actually is what's the word I'm looking for is indigenous. It started by itself.
Yeah.
Spontaneous, exactly. Sorry,
Yeah.
too tired right now. But I think there likely will be a moment in which they will do this,
Yeah.
particularly in Iraq, particularly mindful of the fact that the United States is going to use Iraqi territory to launch land attacks into Iranian Kurdistan. So again, that's why I've said earlier on, I think we're walking into something much, much worse than this, much bloodier, and probably significant casualties on the American side as well.
Matt, when the Iraq War started, there was what we call the Powell Doctrine
Hmm.
that Powell did not pay attention to. Um, and that seems to apply here too as well, maybe even more so, because there is no outcome that is uh, in that the administration doesn't have an outcome in mind. They haven't measured what it would take to get to that outcome, whatever it is, nor have they calculated public support. So, in many ways, this violates all the principles of the Powell Doctrine. Um, what will this have an impact in 2026, do you think? Will Republicans be able to ingest this if it goes on much longer? And will Democrats find the way to see it as an issue that works for them? Or are they just stumbling along? I mean, you
Yeah.
pointed to the courageous voices, but there
Yeah.
are still a lot of those who are um, hedging their bets.
Yeah. I think it absolutely will play a role in the midterms and in 2028, in various ways. One is we already know that Gaza and Israel and Palestine will it continues to be a litmus test issue for the progressive left. And actually, it's quite remarkable that even more centrist Democrats are now finding it necessary to declare that they will not accept AIPAC donations.
Mhm.
AIPAC and its various front groups and cutouts are hard at work trying to find ways to slip money to different candidates. And some candidates think they're clever by trying to take that money, but they're now also paying a price. So we are in a very different kind of debate, the kind of debate that you, I know, Jim, have been working to foster for a long time. Many people on this call have, many of us in the community. Um, to make these donations problematic, if not toxic, and they are becoming both of those things because Gaza and the absolute undeniable catastrophe that the Biden administration supported while lying about it. Just there's still an enormous amount of anger, and we have now evidence that this was one of the reasons that Harris lost, that the DNC is trying to sit on and bury, but it's getting out there. They're doing a very bad job. If anything, the DNC has just raised interest in it by trying to bury it rather than just discuss it responsibly. And I think this war only exacerbates that. It is one more thing on the pile of, the U.S. Israel relationship leading the United States into war. And again, I'm not someone who believes that we were, tricked into war by Netanyahu. Netanyahu manipulated Trump, sure, just like he manipulated Biden, but Biden and Trump allowed themselves to be manipulated. They made their choice. Um, and I think in addition to the anger on the part of the base, I do see more mainstream Democrats, even people like Chuck Schumer, who even if they're not going to get as far into saying what I want them to say, they're saying, okay, is this making your life better? Is this lowering the cost of groceries? They are seeing it clearly as a line of attack, which again, I'll take it.
Mhm.
If they're not supporting a war on Iran with Israel, that is a good thing. They don't have to say everything I want them to say because there are a lot of champions who are saying the things that I think need to be said. But I do see the broader Democratic Party picking up opposition to this from various angles, and I think that's very good.
Thanks, man. A little advertisement here. Sorry, folks. But I do coffee and column every Wednesday, and tomorrow I'm talking about the article I just wrote for this week, which is on the autopsy report. Um, And so if you all want to register and tune in for that tomorrow, please, I'd love to have you. Trita, I want to ask you a question because I know you got to go soon about something else you said. The the bombings in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Doha, and Riyadh now. It was a consulate, embassy rather, there. And Kuwait. Um, the it there was the beginning of a rapprochement with GCC countries. Um, I heard you say in the beginning you saw it was something that they didn't want to do this soon and thought it was a miscalculation. I think it's worse than a miscalculation. I mean, um, I keep thinking of Bush after 9/11, when the world wanted to support you and we turned them away. Um, uh, Iran could have had, I think, more support in the region if they hadn't undertaken. Talk about that a little bit and the calculation they made and whether or not it will have long-term consequences between Iran and the GCC.
First of all, let me say as well, I also worry very much about what this will do to GCC-Iran relations because the rapprochement that has started was extremely positive. It didn't go as far as I would like to see it or at the speed, but getting that tension between those two sides down was crucial for regional security and the well-being of both sides. Now, why they did it is, first of all, if the US Navy was much closer and actually was within their reach, I'm sure they would have targeted that. But the US Navy has, wisely put themselves at a distance in which Iranian missiles cannot hit them. In fact, I don't know if you remember, there was an Iranian drone that reached the US ships a couple of weeks ago that was shut down by the US.
Mhm.
The Iranians actually don't have the satellites that could provide target data in the area that the US ships were. So that target data most likely came from the Chinese or the Russians. And it seems like the Iranians actually sent that drone to be shot down in order to signal to the US that they can see where those ships are. And I think after that, the ships actually pulled back even further. Now, so the only targets they have are US bases in the region. They're going for maximum damage there because I think part of their calculation, to the extent that they're even thinking about what happens afterwards, is that they also want to send a clear signal to the GCC that having US bases on your soil, ostensibly to balance against Iran, did not make you more safe. It made you less safe. Iran didn't attack these bases, these entities in spite of the bases. They attacked them because of the bases. They actually added to their insecurity. And that this will not immediately, because immediately there's going to be a lot of tensions between Iran and GCC, but afterwards there may be some sort of a new equilibrium that is brought on, not in which the GCC states abandon the US, but in which the GCC states do not put all of their eggs in the American security basket and do not do it in such a way in which essentially it is all about balancing against Iran rather than trying to get some sort of a more inclusive and
Does Iran have the capacity to actually do this?
do what
To
to
sustain this to the point where they make that kind of point, or are they exhausting what they have?
I
Uh,
I'm not so sure that they have failed to make that point. Um, I think there's several things happening at the same time here, Jim. On the one hand, they are infuriating the GCC and it's creating a lot of problems for them.
mhm.
That's not going to easily go away. On the other hand, they've also compelled the Qataris, the Omanis, and even the Emiratis to collaborate and trying to put together a coalition to put pressure on Trump to end the war. So both of these things are happening at the same time. To the extent that they can continue, my understanding is that the short-range missiles that they're using against the bases in the GCC, they have tons of far greater arsenal than the longer-range missiles that can hit Israel.
Mhm.
So continuing these attacks, I don't think there's a shortage of. They may have a shortage of launchers and things of that nature. But also, the US has far fewer interceptors, and usually several interceptors are needed to be used to get down just a single missile. The cost and the technology of the interceptor is vastly greater than the cost and the technology of the missiles themselves. So the math here is not working in the U.S. favor. Time, however, may work in the U.S. favor depending on if it is capable of hitting as many of these launchers and many of these depots as possible.
Thanks for joining us, Trita. I know you have to go, and I appreciate you being with us. Um, Matt,
Thank you
uh,
so much. See you all.
um, seems like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon are winners again.
Shocking. Yes.
Yeah. Uh, it is it it is a concern. It raises some questions here
Yeah.
about this, about Ukraine, about Israel, um, and a bloated Department budget. Will American voters get the message, do you think? Bernie's argued this case, AOC's argued this case, but I just don't know if it's one that translates.
I think Americans have gotten the message. It's American politicians that I think are late. And I've written this various times and I keep repeating it. In every election since the end of the Cold War, with the one exception of 2004, the more anti-war president has won.
Mhm.
The more restraint-oriented president has won. Now, I'm not going to pretend that that is why they won. Foreign policy is rarely top of mind. It's rarely a major issue. There are sometimes it is, as with Barack Obama in 2008. He clearly won because of his opposition to the Iraq War. But at the very least, I would say this is an interesting set of data now, and it is a set of data. And what does it tell us? That there is a strong constituency of voters that are attracted to an anti-war message. And that even if they don't determine their ultimate vote on the basis of foreign policy, then an anti-war message is not going to turn them off. And, even though we see this time and time again, we still see Democrats, going into this, they're in this kind of eternal post 9/11 fetal crouch where they're afraid of being seen as not tough enough. I think that's changing. It's taking far too long to change. But I do think it's changing, and that is why I think, I mean, in the midterms, but even more so as we move into 2028, the debate we're going to have in that primary, the absolute importance of having one candidate, two candidates, three, as many candidates as possible that are, ready to offer a different vision of America's role in the world, one that promotes peace instead of promoting war, one that lifts up workers instead of lifting up, defense contractor CEOs. I think that's a powerful argument that Americans are ready for. I mean, listen, Donald Trump gets a lot of traction with the argument that the system is rigged. And the reason why people find that argument attractive is because the system is in fact rigged. Now, obviously, it's rigged on behalf of people like Donald Trump and his rich buddies. It's rigged on behalf of the defense contractors. It's rigged on defense on behalf of all these wealthy interests that have, taken control of our politics. So these things really are all connected. Yeah, Bernie has been sounding the alarm, banging the gong in this for a long time. More people are listening now. There are other people who are landing on this message. Obviously, AOC has been out there with him. Chris Murphy is someone who has also been really, sounding this out. There are others like Congressman Jason Crow from Colorado, a young combat veteran. Seen as kind of a security Democrat, but he really gets the connection between, repairing our politics, decorrupting, de-rigging our politics, and a better foreign policy. So, the argument is getting out there.
I um I asked Liam to do something for me a little while ago, and I forgot to post it. But Liam, could you put it up, and then I want to get your comment on it, Matt.
The president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
I have never heard an explanation for a preemptive strike like this one. We knew that Israel was going to hit them
Yeah.
and that they would hit us. And so we were preemptively bombing Iran. Does that wash?
No, it's absolutely bonkers. I mean, I saw that, and there's a great quote from Frank Zappa that I bring up that I use sometimes where he says, "This is going beyond mere mumbo jumbo. We've moved into the realm of mumbo pocus. And that is what I thought of when I heard that. Now, when you think about what Rubio was actually saying, that we knew Israel was about to attack. And of course, we would never try to constrain Israel, this small client state that is enormously reliant on us. We would never stop them. But we knew they were going to attack, and that would cause Iran to do things. What he is saying is that the actual imminent threat was Israel,
Mm-hmm.
right? The actual imminent threat was a decision by the Israeli government. So he said that there was a huge reaction to it. If you saw the press conference he gave today, he's cleaning that up, and that's what's crazy too. I mean, these goofballs are still workshopping their actual reasons for the war, like like a comedy troupe behind the scenes, trying to make it better, trying to come up and sharpen it. They still don't know. But like I said earlier, I mean, it's yes, obviously Netanyahu has been manipulating Trump and pushing him into this the whole time, but I do resist the idea that we were forced into this. Trump is the one who put those forces in the region. Trump is the one who decided to go ahead with the attack, just as he did last June. So again, I do think we need to put the buck where it belongs. That's not to absolve Netanyahu. He's a liar and a manipulator and a war criminal. But the U.S. does make its own choices.
Thank you. Is Maya still here?
Still here, Jim.
Okay. Yeah. Are there questions that come up you want to?
There are. I want to start with a political one for you, Matt. Do you think that Trump was counting on Americans more or less automatically supporting this war because that's what Americans do when we go to war?
I think he probably was, but if you look at again Venezuela, he didn't get a big bump. Americans, I think, still a majority of Americans opposed the operation. A majority of Americans opposed last June's war. But the question is how much of this stuff actually reaches him. This guy kind of mainlines Fox News. He's surrounded by people who are afraid of disappointing him, who always want to tell him what he wants to hear to stay in his favor. Um, so again, I think I'm sure he had expectations, but I don't even know how and when and if bad news reaches him.
Another question, Matt, staying on the politics of this. Do you think that the Democrats think let Trump have this? It will be unpopular and therefore it will weaken Republicans and clear the way for us.
No, I think that is unfortunately, what a lot of cynical Democrats do. I mean, that has basically been the Democratic leadership's argument is just let Trump keep screwing up, and then we'll come in and pick up the pieces, and people realize that we're better than Trump. And of course, that's not a good argument. But that's because the Democratic Party is unfortunately led by cowards. I think there are more people are making clear like we cannot rely on that. This is a catastrophe. People are dying. Americans are under threat. People in the region, of course, are under threat. A school full of little girls was blown up on the very first day. We cannot afford to just sit and wait as Donald Trump poll numbers tank. And I do expect that argument is going to carry.
Matt, another question for you. How much do you think is decided by Trump? How much is decided by his advisors like Stephen Miller or Kushner? And actually more directly related to that, how much of that do you think is the conventional wisdom in DC on the Hill? Like how much do people think in terms of members of Congress that these are Trump's calls versus the advisors doing this stuff, particularly on the economic and business pieces?
Yeah. I mean, I think Trump is a decision maker, but he is notoriously fickle. And the joke is, and I've heard it enough that I take it seriously, that he can be swayed just by the last person who spoke to him, and then he runs out and makes the phone call and makes the decision. Because he actually does see surprise and unpredictability as an asset. That's really the way he approaches policy, because that's the way he approaches deal making. When he was, cutting deals for real estate in Manhattan or in Atlantic City or wherever, being unpredictable is something that he thought was to his advantage. Now, I don't think that works when you're dealing in international affairs and dealing with the lives of tens and hundreds of thousands of people, but he still believes that it's valuable. The joke I've heard is that Donald Trump likes to govern by season finale, where you just have to wait. It's going to be amazing. Even I don't know what's going to happen. You just have to wait and see. Um, but he is the one making decisions. Now, obviously, there are people who have more or less over influence with him or over him at different times. Um, and I think there is, when you listen to him talk, I do think he's kind of losing it, but I don't think it's the case that he has been, that there is someone kind of pulling the strings behind him.
Question for you. Um, why do you think there's not been a heavier retaliation towards Israel, given what's happening in Iran? Is it possibly happening and we're not hearing about it here in the US? First of all, do you agree with the premise, and how would you both answer that?
Like retaliation against Israel by Iran?
Yeah.
Um, I think, well, first of all, I mean, Israel has a pretty heavy censorship of reporting of the attacks. And, one thing when I was there in October, there is like a whole series of blocks in downtown Tel Aviv, like apartment blocks in downtown central Tel Aviv that were just obliterated by these missiles. And I had not seen that reported because, of course, there's censorship in Israel. So what I came away with just from observing with my own eyes and also talking to close friends and colleagues there is that, yeah, those missiles were pretty devastating. They were pretty terrifying. So again, I don't know. My assumption is that the missile attacks have been worse than have been reported. Um, but at the same time, as far as I can tell, they have not really achieved a goal in terms of dampening Israeli enthusiasm for the war, which would be one of their goals, is to frighten people away from continuing to make war.
We haven't talked about oil. We haven't talked about what it's going to do to markets in the region. And we haven't talked about the consequences in Israel in terms of the politics of it.
Yeah.
But that will all wait another conversation because we're at 8:44. Matt, thank you so much for this.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
You've just continued to be a great voice here in Washington. I so appreciate having the opportunity to know and work with you. I always say that the big lie of Iraq wasn't the weapons of mass destruction. It was Paul Wolfowitz going before Congress and saying, this will only take 3 weeks. It will take a limited number of troops. We'll be out of there in 6 months, and it's only going to cost us $1 billion, and then Iraqi oil will kick in. That was the lie, and the same lie is here. This is going to be quick and easy. We'll get out of it. It'll be done. They'll have a new government, and the people will rise up. And it's the same. I mean, it's the gun manufacturers, it's the arms manufacturers that are going to profit from this. And they never ask the question, how much does this cost? Until it's when you want to talk about healthcare, or when you want to talk about public education, or when you want to talk about stuff that matters for people. Then, oh, it's going to raise the deficit. Here we are, and I thank you for joining. We're